first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to get to reconnect and have these conversations. Right now, I am in a position where I'm a program manager for actually anti-stigma work. Then I work for an organization that supports individuals with mental health challenges. So a lot of the work I do looks at stigma associated with mental health challenges and what we can do to dismantle that and increase acceptance and inclusion. And in addition to that, I'm also a white, heterosexual, cisgender female who was born and raised in the United States. And I'm a mom of 2 little ones as well, and doing my best to be a community member and a broader family member to many. Well, lots of individuals come to mind, myself included, and it also brings to mind some of the readings I've done around Dr. Pat Corrigan. He's an international stigma researcher, and he talks about the importance of pairing education with relationships in order to address truly stigma. And that's what I saw to be the most impactful through a lot of this diversity work. Is when people got a chance to learn, but also build relationships with others, and then saw a lot of memorable change as a result. So even myself included, I got information or knowledge and education around transphobia, for example, and what it looks like that individuals who identify as transgender, what kind of discrimination they experience, and the ways that I've been socialized to think differently of people who identify as transgender. And yet I didn't get as much growth in my own challenging of stigma until I was able to really build a relationship with someone who identified as transgender. And that came through my experience at NCCJ. And it was through that friendship really that developed with a number of individuals who identified as transgender, gender neutral, that I was really able to see transformation in myself and in my own beliefs around issues that pertain to transgender individuals. It personalizes it for someone, right? It personalizes it for you, same for me. And then when those oppressive or stigmatizing thoughts come to our mind about that identity, then so does that friend that we've now made, or that person that we've met. And it's easier then for us to say, well, this doesn't apply to that person. This is a friend of mine. So it pushes us to challenge those thoughts in a new way, which I think really helps make progress towards creating this kind of equitable society that we're working towards. I would define diversity as a variety of thought, a variety of perspectives, and certainly of identities, social identities. You can't have diversity if you have a room of individuals that have all the same background. Even though I can say, even if you think everyone has the same background, where you really were to dig into it, you would probably have diversity in the room because people come from different walks of life or experience the world differently, even if they have similar identities. And I think that part of the problem is that when we stop at just diversity, we're looking just to create a space that has a variety of perspectives included. And what we need to do is really take it to that next level, which is what NCCJ often looks at, and look at how can we create a place that challenges oppression and do anti-oppression work. And anti-oppression work includes diversity, but then gives people the opportunity to explore power and privilege and how those things come into play in people's lives and have a negative impact on some people's ability to really be their full selves and achieve their full potential. It's kind of similar to what I was saying around the anti-oppression piece. I think that that's how I would define it, as an opportunity for people to explore first who they are and the different identities that they hold, and then the ways in which they've been socialized, meaning the way that they've been taught to think about their different identities, and then how that impacts the way in which they go about the world. And so there are going to be things in my own identity, for example, that I am privileged around. So in the United States, being white is certainly a privileged identity. And it's something that I don't often have to think about. I just go about the world and interacting, and rarely have to think about the race that I am in those spaces. And part of the goal in this anti-oppression work is for me to think more about it and think about the things that I'm doing subconsciously to those around me that may negatively be impacting their experience and their access to opportunities. And I guess certainly not just subconsciously, but perhaps there's things I'm doing on purpose, consciously as well, that need to be challenged in order for us to create a space where people can, as I mentioned before, really reach their full potential and achieve kind of the goals and the aspirations that they have, that hopefully all people get a chance to do. What I think of when I hear of tolerance is I'll put up with you, right?
Yes.
I'll put up with you. Well, when I go into a space and I know that those around me are going to be tolerant and just put up with me, I'm not going to be able to contribute to my full extent. I'm not going to be able to be my full self. I'm not going to be comfortable sharing my full perspectives. And then that negatively impacts the kind of growth that a company could see, the kind of progress that they could make. Because there's lots of research that shows the more diverse of a team that you have, the more outputs you're going to have, the more success you're going to have, and that really generates amazing and creative ideas. And I should say, not just stopping at the diversity, but a space where people are diverse and also welcomed to be their full selves and are in an inclusive environment. So the tolerance piece, you're right, doesn't promote this space of inclusion. It promotes this, I guess, if you have to be that way, fine, I'm not going to say anything about it kind of response. But in the inclusive space is not only are you allowed here, welcomed here, but you get to be your full self, just as I get to be my full self in that space too. And when we're able to do that, we're really able to achieve the best outcomes we can. Jihak, you just even touched on it with that comment of I'm allowing you to be here. That's reinforcing kind of a place of privilege, that this is my space and I'm going to allow you to come into it instead of this is our space and each of us brings something important to it. And because it's our space, we all have ownership over it. And we get to create the space of creativity instead of I have ownership, I get to pick and choose, and I also get to pick and choose how you get to interact in it. I mean, that's far from a welcoming environment. Yeah, one of the big things that NCCJ speaks to in its work is the role of multiple identities, as you had mentioned, that all of us bring multiple identities to any situation. So as I mentioned in my introduction, as I'm somebody who's heterosexual in regards to sexual orientation, I'm cisgender in regards to gender, and female in regards to biological sex, and middle class, and American. I bring all of these things to all these spaces. And when we look at oppression, if we're focusing in on just one identity, we're ignoring the fact that us as individuals have all sorts of identities. So if we approach it from the factor of, let's say, mental health, which I mentioned is my current, a lot of the current work I'm doing in, if we're just looking at addressing oppression as it relates to mental health, we may have success in making some inroads there, but everyone that we work with also has a racial identity, has a gender, has a sexual orientation. So we may make some progress in mental health, but that would leave that individual potentially experiencing oppression in lots of other identities. So it's really important for, I believe, in anti-oppression work, for us to take this multiple identity approach and think about how do we address it across the board in order for us to really achieve this kind of equitable, compassionate culture that I would like to see. We need to be able to address it in all sorts of different avenues. Otherwise, we'll truly never achieve that. sometimes I hear people say, it's like the oppression Olympics. People
Yes.
are, they are competing for
Yes.
who has it the worst.
Mm.
And unfortunately, then it takes a lot of the energy away from what could we be doing to be achieving equity across all of
Yes.
these,
Yes.
and instead of us competing for who has it the worst. And a lot of times I remind myself, pain is pain. And that's ultimately what's happening around oppression, is people are experiencing pain, and they're experiencing it from a systemic level and institutional level, which is even more painful, I would say, than an individual level. And it doesn't help anyone for me to say my pain is worse than your pain.
Yes.
We both have pain. How can we work together to alleviate each other's pain and make progress? And that's why I also do feel, though, it is important for organizations to know what kind of work they're best at doing.
Yes, sure.
So as I mentioned, the one I do now, we focus on mental health. However, it's important for us to have relationships and collaborate with organizations that do work in racial justice, in gender identity, in all sorts of different avenues, as I mentioned, because of that multiple identity focus. So we can keep our niche, our focus, but still be connected to the work of others and support the work of others. And that way, when we're all able to do that with each other, we can really see some more global progress. One thing that it brings to mind, shifting the focus, and instead it's me, let's say, talking about identities in which I'm oppressed around, and asserting that those are the most important, and then getting upset with other individuals who have oppressed identities and asserting that no, mine is the most important. And then the piece that's left out of that is the individuals that are in a privileged identity in all of these different spaces.
Yes.
And instead it's folks that are experiencing oppression really fighting with each other instead of us collaborating and working together to try and dismantle these systems of oppression and the ways we experience oppression at an institutional, systemic level. And I think that there could be a lot more power if we think about ways in which to collaborate instead of thinking of ways to hate each other or bring each other's work down. We are supporting the work then of the oppressor in lots of ways. We're doing the work of the oppressor by saying, no, I am going to take my energy and tear you down instead of trying to build you up while you try to build me up so that together we can make progress. And in that, take moments to look at the ways in which we ourselves are the oppressor.
Yes.
Right? Because I have both privileged and targeted identities.
Right.
So in some spaces I'm being oppressed, in others I represent those who are doing the oppressing.
Yes.
So important. For me, honestly, that's where some of the power of multiple identity comes into play for me, is that when I'm able to remember the pain that I feel when I experience discrimination and oppression and use that to fuel my work to dismantle ways in identities that I am privileged in. So when I take being a woman, for example, and remember what it feels like being discriminated against and experiencing oppression as a woman, and use that to fuel my anti-racism work as a white individual, it helps me stay engaged. It helps me stay connected. And I think could see us as a society, when we're able to do that across multiple identities, that we could really find a lot more common ground and, like I mentioned, make some more progress. The format that we found to be the most beneficial is what we call experiential learning. And really what that means is that it's an opportunity for people to engage in the content that really personalizes it. So that means that there was a lot of interactive activities where you're up, moving around. You're also experiencing a lot of dialogues, a lot of talking with each other and hearing each other's perspectives. Certainly, there's lots of chances to incorporate games too that get people even more engrossed in the content because you forget almost what we're talking about. You're playing the game, but you're getting a chance to experience it in a different way. And then certainly different ways that we did dialogue. So we would do full group dialogue, but also in fishbowl format, which means we would take a smaller group and have them sit together and have a dialogue, and then the broader group would be outside just listening, getting to hear what they're sharing. To also caucus groups, so individuals that would get into small groups based off of identity. So all of those who identify as gay would get together and talk, those who identify as straight or heterosexual would talk, so on and so forth, so that you get to have a different kind of conversation when you're talking with folks that have a similar identity as yours, and then bring your perspectives back to the full group and share those, so everybody gets to hear and learn from each other. One of the primary purpose, one, is for people to do their own individual exploration. So better understand who they are and how they came to be who they are.
Yes.
That piece around socialization. I think it's a critical piece of the foundation. In order for people to stay motivated and engage the work, they need to have a good understanding of what they bring to this space. And then in addition to knowing who I am, the next piece of the hoped outcome is that through that build relationship and that new knowledge, that people are also motivated to be engaged in social justice work and advocacy work, to be able to advocate for people that perhaps are experiencing discrimination or oppression, in order to dismantle some of those systems of oppression that we've been talking about. So that individual paired with advocacy motivation, and hopefully the relationships are so much part of that, as I've mentioned throughout our time together, that in order for me to stay motivated in it, I need to feel connected to others.
Yes.
So that's another big piece. We talk a lot about it in CCJ, was to address the issue and not the person.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I think a lot of times in social justice, anti-oppression, diversity work, we start to attack people as a whole. And really what we're trying to do is attack the issue of oppression.
Yes.
Right. And when we're able to phone in on that instead of attacking an entire person, we have a lot more success. I mean, we all have areas of growth in us. We're all learning, we're all on our own journey. And so if we really focus on the issue of systemic oppression, for example, or discrimination, we're going to have more success than trying to, and it's more accurate than trying to attack a person's entire being. And we've talked a little bit about before already, is finding that the common value that we have.
Yes.
And when you're able to find the commonality and speak to really does contribute to your personal values, your organization's values, our society's values, then people feel connected to it and they see the importance, and they're willing to put in the time, the energy, the finances in order for it to continue. So I think that's crucial. And then being able to build off of that and really develop those partnerships, like we were just talking about, partnerships with community organizations that are kind of on the ground doing work that can contribute energy and time perhaps, but not necessarily maybe the monetary money in order to make the wheels continue to turn. And then start to get those relationships with larger organizations or private donors that do have access to funds that are willing to contribute to your mission is really important. So that kind of pairing all those things together, but starting with that connecting to personal values or organizational values is probably at the foundation. I think similar to what I was saying, that connection back to what their values are and what they would like to see accomplished helped us integrate into the education system. And that the schools that we were working with, and maybe broadly speaking in the United States, public education wants to create an environment where students feel like they are included. And I guess really why they want to do that is because, and research would support, that young people learn the most when they feel comfortable in an environment, when they feel when they feel like they are cared about. And I'm not going to feel cared about if I feel like my identities are not respected
Yeah.
in an environment. And then I'm going to be so preoccupied with that, I'm not going to be able to learn or to grow academically as much as if I was in an environment that was inclusive.
Yeah.
So that may be a commonality in Korean society
Yeah.
too,
Yes.
wanting our young people to be successful academically.
Yeah.
And in order for them to achieve that, they need to feel like they're accepted and welcomed into those environments. And in order for you to have accepting and welcoming environments, you need to have conversations about equity and oppression. Well, I would say first, just a thank you and a thank you for your interest, their interest in learning more about this topic. That's where this all starts, is
Yeah.
curiosity
Yes.
and people wanting to learn more, and hope too, people having hope that our world can be even better, and that we can create environments that are more welcoming for everyone. And through that we're able then to have a more peaceful society, a more productive society, a healthier society. And I think most people would say we want that, right?
Yeah.
Most of us are looking for that, more joy, more connection, more healthy environments. And so I would ask people, if that's truly your desire, to take this and give it a chance and give it an opportunity to have some of these harder conversations, and take a moment to look at yourselves and explore the great things that you're contributing to our world, and maybe some of the areas that you could do some additional work and make some improvements, and also take advantage along the way of building these stronger relationships. And that, I'd say, if folks are able to lean into that, I do feel like there will be a positive experience for them and lots of opportunity and growth along the way. Bye.